This is Pastor Jeff Kelley, inviting you to join me for Gleanings of Grace, a ministry of Grace Baptist Church in Liberty, South Carolina. Situated in the foothills of the upstate of South Carolina, Grace Baptist Church is centrally located between Greenville and Clemson. If you live within driving distance, or if you should be visiting our area, we extend a personal invitation for you to worship with us. You will find a warm and friendly congregation where visitors are welcome. You can learn more about our church or contact us at gracebaptistchurchsc.org. I was reading through the book of Ephesians, and as I got to this very well-known passage of Scripture, I was struck by this passage in a way that I've never really thought or pondered about it before. But as I was reading, it's almost like that word finally jumped off the page at me. I'm not so sure it was just the word finally. It was just almost as if reading through this, I saw that Paul was encouraging the Ephesian believers to something in particular. The Ephesian church is a church that Paul writes to, speaking of the grand place that we have seated in the heavenlies with Christ. It's a book that is filled with great truths, and Paul moves in chapter 4 after giving us 3 chapters of great doctrinal significance. He moves to the chapters dealing with great practical importance. Knowing these things, understanding these great doctrinal truths, now live in a manner that is worthy of the vocation, the calling to which you've been called. And 3 chapters of practical Christian living. But when Paul gets through with applying the doctrines of the first 3 chapters, applying them in everyday life. This is how you live at home. This is how you ought to behave in the world. He says, finally. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord. Wouldn't that seem to be a rather foolish thing to say? You've just preached great doctrinal truth to this church. You've just explained to this church in probably the greatest way in all of the New Testament what living a Christian life really looks like in the last 3 chapters. And then you offer this what would appear to be a warning. I would contend that it's not such a simple thing and not an overstatement for Paul to make. Because years later, the Apostle John is going to write to this church. And John says, I know thy works, and thy labor, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. They had no toleration for evil. Thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars. They didn't have a problem putting people to the test. Thou hast borne and hast patience, and for my name's sake hast labored and hast not fainted. They were enduring. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. The great church at Ephesus lost something between Ephesians and Revelation 2. So it would seem to me that what Paul is saying when he says, finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord, there's a reason why he ought to say it. Now, in many respects, my message this morning is going to turn on words just like finally. I was brought to the text, if you will, by the word finally. But as I look at this text, and we'll see in just a moment, the first part that I want to draw your attention to in this text, you'll notice in verse number 13, there is this word, wherefore. Finally, there is something Paul has to say to the Ephesian believers in his final concluding words to them in this letter. And based on what he has to say to them, he says there is an action they need to take. Wherefore, based on, what I have just told you, you need to take this action. You need to, respond in this manner. And he gives that to us through the remainder of the verses down through verse number 20. But then he uses a word in verse number, it's in verse 13. And also I would connect it with a word in verse number 14. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God. You'll notice the word that, the cause, the reason. Why should you do this? That. And then in verse number 14, stand therefore. Finally, which gets our attention and draws us into the message that Paul has for us. Wherefore, the action, what needs to come out of what Paul is giving to us in this message. Therefore, the purpose or the ultimate aim for which Paul is driving this. As I was preparing this message or pondering this message, I was reminded of an old song that used to be sung when I was a kid, and the song is a song that I didn't go look up all the words because there's really just the chorus is all I remember. And I used to hear this when I was probably 5, 6, 7 years old. And the point seems to be that the writer was trying to say, I'm going to engage, I'm going to fight, I'm going to stay in the battle. But the words went like this: it's a battlefield, brother, not a recreation room. It's a fight, not a game. So run if you want to, run if you will, but I came here to stay. Now, my emphasis is not to emphasize the latter part of that, I came here to stay. I think that ought to be the conclusion of our understanding. But I'm interested in the first part of that to simply say that what Paul is saying to us in this text, and what is important for us to get, and what seems to be evident that even the great Ephesian church missed to some measure, is that indeed this life is a battlefield, brother and sister. It's a fight, and it's not a recreation room. It's a fight. It's not a game. And if we're going to be successful in our Christian life, we're going to have to understand that truth. And Paul says, finally, brethren, you need to be aware that you're in a battle. We hear the term quite often, but I want to apply it to this text this morning. And I would suggest that this text is actually the real epitome of what the statement means. Have you ever heard someone say they're in the fight of their life? And that's really what Ephesians chapter 6 is all about. It's the fight of one's life. I draw your attention, first of all, to the believer's preparation. Finally, Paul has something to say to here to us about the mental state of a believer. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord. Now, we might say, no, he's talking about the physical perspective. You need to be strong. No, one will never be strong until they are mentally prepared to be strong. You ever had someone, maybe in a joking way, walk up and jostle you in some way? Maybe they did it out of fun. They walk up behind you, they see you, you maybe don't see them, they walk up behind you and they bump into you. Oh, excuse me, and that's their way of kind of joking with you as they acknowledge your presence. Maybe you're standing somewhere and you're not paying a whole lot of attention and someone accidentally jostles you and they kind of knock you over. You know what? If I anticipate that someone is coming at me intentionally or otherwise and they're going to hit me, I don't mean physically to assault me. I mean to, bump into me in some way. I prepare myself. I mentally say, they're going to hit me, and then I brace myself. You do this in an automobile accident. You see a car coming at you and careening at you, what happens? Instinctively, your brain says, they're going to hit me, and you tense up. You brace yourself for that. Sometimes it's not the best thing we can do, but we think somehow I can break this. And so what Paul is saying is to be strong. We will never be strong until we mentally say, there is something that is going to hit me, take me out, attack me. engage me in spiritual warfare in some way, and I have to be prepared. He's addressing the mental preparedness. Might I take it even further? Not just the mental preparedness, but the spiritual preparedness. For the believer, it isn't just a matter of intellect, it's a matter of spiritual preparedness. You'll notice the source of our strength. He does not say, be strong, and all the great ideas you can come up with, and all the things that you know to do. He says, be strong in the Lord. Now, it may seem trite and it may seem simplistic, and quite frankly, sometimes we may not fully understand it ourselves. But to be strong in the Lord is the key for where our strength is. And probably the best way for us to understand this and to learn this is to read through those Psalms where David starts out praying, oh Lord, they're going to get me. And the next thing you know, he's saying, but you're my help, you're my strength, you're my right arm, you're the rock that I run to. And the next thing you know, he's going, I'm going to be victorious. And he finds strength in the Lord. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. Our strength is to be found in the Lord. But you'll notice, secondly, not only does he point out the source of our strength, but he points out the methods of Satan. In fact, the word that he uses here, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, is a Greek word that if you trace it, and I'm not an etymologist, but if you trace this word and understand its ultimate meaning, it comes to us in the English in many respects of the idea of the method. In fact, someone has suggested that it's the combination of two words, going after and away. It could be said in many respects that it's literally a going after. That you may be able to understanding the way in which the devil, Satan, is going to go after you. That you may be able to withstand against the way in which the devil is going to go after you. As I was pondering this, I thought of the ways in which Satan does go after the people of God. With Eve, it was a direct challenge. Did God say that? And in today's society, Satan may not ask the question in such a subtle fashion. It might be asked in much more of a mocking way. You got to be kidding me. Did God say that? You think God said that? Fear. Elijah performed a great feat on Mount Carmel. But the next thing you'd find, he's fearing for his life. Peter. Why did Peter deny the Lord? Peter was moments prior to his denial prepared to fight even unto death. But you let a little bit of peer pressure attack Peter. And mind you, I'm not saying this like, well, I can't believe Peter did this. No, it doesn't take that much peer pressure for us to deny the Lord. Just a little bit of peer pressure. Just someone saying, I think you're one of them. Oh, no. To be honest with you, think about it for a minute. Most of us, the world doesn't even have to say, you're one of them. We get up every morning and we try not to look like one of them. Do we not? Just the thought that someone might identify us as being some odd or strange Christian behaving person. And what do? We try to blend in and adapt with the world. Doesn't even take the accusation. Just the thought of the accusation. Doubt. The Lord appeared to Moses. I'm going to send you back. I don't think I can talk plain enough for this. I'm just not sure we can do this. You really think we're going to be able to accomplish that? Appealing to our desires. Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. And you know what I find so sad and scary? Is that those are not methods that will necessarily attack us out there somewhere. Every last one of those methods can be exhibited and discovered and found sitting on the pew of any church in America. The preacher can get up and preach against worldliness, and within our own mind we immediately begin to wrestle with Satan about how committed we're going to be. The preacher can get up and say, this is what you need to do to obey and to follow God, and immediately doubt and fear and all of these things, and sitting right in the midst of the house of God, we can be saying, I could be doing this today. All my friends are doing that. And worldliness can creep right into our hearts, right in the house of God. We see not only the source of our strength, the methods of Satan, but I want to draw your attention very quickly to the identity of our enemy. Our enemy is not flesh and blood. Paul identifies our enemy in a rather unique way. Principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, could I suggest to you, I think this is very important for us to understand. It is not that we are to engage in some physical altercation with the forces of evil in this world. Our battle is not fought with natural means, but it is fought by spiritual means. Job's greatest trial was not to be fought by taking on his detractors. It was a spiritual warfare. Job was representative, if you will, of the side of God, and unfortunately many who profess to be on the side of God worked out to be working on the side of Satan. It's a spiritual battle. The idea of principalities is a word from which we get the idea of the beginning or first things, and it's applied by many, I suppose, in this text to bear the idea of angels or demons. And I don't know that I'm 100% correct, but it causes me to wonder if it isn't, in some ways, the idea of fighting and engaging against the very first or the primary or the most significant. Maybe that's the application to angels, but the most basic of things. That's where our fight is. Against powers, not just some person, but against authorities and powers that engage against the believer. Rulers of the darkness of this world, clearly an indication to the powers of Satan and spiritual wickedness in high places. This is not a battle against somebody that we can necessarily identify in this world. This is against Satan himself. There is a battle that is raging that is bigger than what we see in this world. And might I just point out to us this morning that it's imperative for us to understand that. I draw your attention very quickly to the believer's armor. Not only do we see the believer's preparation, that is, he needs to be spiritually prepared, have a spiritual mindset. But you'll notice he says, wherefore. In light of this mental preparedness, our spiritual mental faculties, if you understand what I'm saying, a mind instructed by the spiritual truths is prepared to then be equipped or armed in a manner to engage in this warfare. Wherefore, take unto you. And if we go through these things, it's easy. Please don't misunderstand at all what I'm saying. I think it's a wonderful thing. But, now they even, or I say now, maybe they don't even do this anymore, but you could probably go to a local Christian bookstore if they still exist. If not, you can get it online. And you can buy this as a little outfit for your kids to wear. And they got the little armor, and they got the sword of the Spirit, and the sandals, and the helmet of salvation. You could just make them a little Christian little warrior if you want to. And I suppose that's a good thing, maybe a good teaching method to teach our children. But could I suggest this morning that don't get hung up necessarily on those facets. Take what Paul is trying to say. Paul says that your loins would be girt about with truth. Could I suggest to you that we are wasting our time to engage in any battle with Satan if we don't know and understand the truth? This isn't a battle about opinions, it's a battle about truth. And a lot of the problems, and I'm telling you, if you follow social media at all, this Christian world, the spiritual world, is an absolute chaos today over spiritual, or what we might define as theological matters. I mean, it's hard to know today who believes. People are taking the strangest of positions. And it's truth that matters. It isn't a matter of do I like or do I dislike this personality. No. Has nothing to do. And you know what? With all due respect, some people are making it all that. If you criticize them, well, you're criticizing the person. No. Our attacks, our engaging in spiritual warfare should not be against the person. They should not become ad hominem. But can I suggest to you, it does matter about truth. And it doesn't matter who it is. The greatest and the most respected of theologians who goes against truth has to be, can I say respectfully, rebuked. There's a wonderful song in second, I didn't even think about this, but if I just draw your attention to it, you don't even have to look. But number 2 in our hymnal, "Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace, streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise." Robert Robinson was a wicked man. He grew up, as I understand it, in a Christian home, but walked away from the Lord, became a very wicked man, and ultimately came back to God. And he wrote this song saying, "Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy praise." And he made a wonderful statement in this song. Prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. And he said, "Here's my heart. Oh, take and fix it. Seal it for thy courts above." That sounds powerful, does it not? From what I understand, he died a Unitarian, denying the Trinity. A man who knew his own heart was prone to wonder. Let his heart wonder. Doesn't matter. We sing his song regularly, as we should. My point is simply this. It is not a matter of personality. It is a matter of truth. Spent more time there than I intended to. Righteousness. The battle must be fought with honor. The breastplate of righteousness. It is not that we engage in this warfare that somehow we can outdo Satan or out-trick him or out-maneuver him. No, it is to be done in honor and righteousness, according to the standard of God. The preparation of the gospel of peace speaks to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it speaks to me of the fact that we do not stomp through this world trying to crush anything and everything that we don't like. Could I say, what is that, what was it, Reagan's admonition? Speak softly but carry a big stick. I don't mean this in any way the wrong way, but walk softly, but speak the truth. Walk gently through this life. Our purpose is not just to stomp and to crush and to wreak havoc, but our purpose is to walk through this life that truth might abound, seeking peace. Faith, that's the only way we're going to win this war. This is a battle of faith. We have to believe. We have to recognize that we are not fighting a battle of man's own making, but we are fighting in the battle that God has placed us in. The shield of faith, that's how we're going to defend ourselves against the fiery darts of the wicked. And the most important, I suppose, of all of this would be the helmet of salvation. We are wasting our time if we have not protected ourselves with faith in Christ. The offensive weapon that we have is the Word of God. And we take on Satan by means of the two-edged sword, which is our weapon to engage the enemy with. Finally, this weaponry involves prayer. Praying always. All of this saturated with prayer. Isn't that amazing? Praying always. Going into the battle with prayer. And I find it very interesting, watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. I love the mindset and the motto of our military. They don't go into battle to leave anybody behind. In an amazing way, they're watching out for their brother, their sister who fights alongside of them, and for the believer. That is exactly what our prayers ought to be. Praying always with all supplication, and watching thereunto. Seeing a brother in a battle, we ought to pray for that brother. Seeing a brother in the heat of a storm, we ought to pray for that brother or sister. Finally, this morning we see not only the preparation of the believer, the armor of the believer, But could I leave with us very quickly the purpose of the believer? Finally, that's our preparation. Wherefore, that's pointing our attention to our armor. That, or therefore. Why do we do all this? Well, there's two perspectives on this. One defensive and one offensive. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. That's really interesting. Because it would seem to suggest to me that every believer is going to face the pressure to not live in a manner that's pleasing to God. To be taken out in some way by Satan. And so in the evil day, you're going to need to know you're in a spiritual warfare, and you're going to have to take all of this spiritual armament in order that you might withstand. You're going to have to withstand. You're going to have to fight against this. And having done all to stand, it's going to be a fight. Satan is interested in one thing, and that is to take out the believer. And he will put any and all pressure that is necessary to destroy a believer. You've got to be... I keep hesitating because I fear people will misunderstand what I'm saying. When I speak of being mentally prepared, I'm not talking about just a natural phenomenon. I'm talking about being mentally prepared from a spiritual sense. That is, not just enough to go, well, I'm having a hard time. No, to understand spiritually that this is a spiritual warfare. Your mind instructed by the things of God so that you understand that I have to be spiritually aware of what I'm in. And be, simply going, man, we are in one more battle. I think I'll sit down here and watch them fight. No. I think I better make sure I have my armament on. Could I suggest we don't lay the shield down and say, if I get in trouble, I'll call the preacher and ask for some verses to help me with this. Please, if you're in trouble, call. I'll give you all the verses I can. But can I suggest to you that sometimes my answer is going to be, you're going to have to take the shield of faith, and every time that fiery dart comes at you, you're just going to have to hold it up and let that fiery dart hit. Is that fearful? I would think so. I don't think it'd be a whole lot of fun to be a Roman soldier being shot at with a fiery dart that keeps hitting my shield. And if you're that soldier, every once in a while, you're going to be thinking to yourself, one of those things is going to get through. But no, not with the power of the Holy Spirit. We fend off another. We fend off another. And like Christ, we say, it is written. And we fend off another. It's defensive. That we may be able to withstand, and to having done all that we know to do, to stand. Secondly, I point out to you that it is also offensive. Do you notice what Paul says at the very end of this text we're looking at? Praying with all prayer and supplication. And then in verse number 19, he says, and for me. Praying for me. It would seem to me that Paul is saying, I'm in a fight of my life. So I say to you this morning, I say, not to discourage you, but maybe to encourage you. It's a battlefield, brother, sister. It's not a recreation room. It's a fight. It's not a game. And I hope this morning that we can hear Paul say, finally, be aware of this. Wherefore, take on the whole armor of God that you can stand. Therefore, that you will stand, and the gospel will go forth. You've been listening to Gleanings of Grace, a ministry of Grace Baptist Church in Liberty, South Carolina. We invite you to correspond with us by writing to Grace Baptist Church, Post Office Box 1454, Easley, South Carolina 29641. You may also contact us or learn more about the church by visiting gracebaptistchurchsc.org.